Not sure what to do, I looked up at her beaming face. She seemed genuinely pleased by the sight of the young woman sitting before her. "Come out and take a look in the mirror." I walked out of the bathroom, taking my time across the tile and onto the carpet. I heard a gasp, and the woman across from me froze, staring at me in disbelief. For years, I had dreamed of the day I could fully embody this look. Not only had I achieved it, but my own mother had helped me transform. "I don't know what to say," I murmured, my voice sounding different, even to me. "It's something you'll get used to," she replied, her tone both comforting and practical. "It will eventually feel less like an event and more like a routine, but there will always be special occasions, holidays, Easter, weddings, when you'll want to look your best." I noticed the way she emphasized her last words and studied her face in the mirror. At that moment, I didn't realize she was gaining the daughter she had always wanted, a daughter who would one day wear white and walk down the aisle. That thought flickered away quickly, replaced by the warmth of light breaking into both of our lives. "Ready?" she asked, her excitement palpable. "For what?" I asked, turning on my heels with unexpected confidence, my hands clasped in front of me in a feminine manner. "To meet the world, Jamie," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "Money's tight, but you'll need a few new outfits and other things. Some of your old sweatshirts and jeans will still work, but you'll outgrow them soon enough." My heart skipped a beat and then began to thump wildly in my chest. I felt a rush of nervousness, excitement, too, hidden beneath the folds of the dress. The thought of stepping out into the world, beyond the safety of home, made me lightheaded. The stores wouldn't be crowded, since it was a weekday, but we'd still run into people. Some might recognize Mom and want to chat. They wouldn't recognize me at first, I was sure, but being with Mom could give me away. I looked at her in the mirror, and she nodded with anticipation. "You'll be going to middle school in a month, Jamie. It might help if you meet a few friends and let word spread before classes start. Many of the students won't have known you before this happened." She was right. I had always dreamed of walking through life as a young woman, with no one questioning my authenticity. The transformation that had started with a single insect had brought me closer to that dream, though there was still more to work through. "Can we take it slow and go out of town the first time?" I asked, my nerves getting the better of me. "We have stores in town, but the mall?" she offered, reading my hesitation. The thought of the mall sent a rush of adrenaline through me, and I found myself short of breath. I wanted to avoid the stores nearby, where everyone knew Mom, but the mall seemed like a safer option. It was a larger, less personal space. I nodded in agreement. "Let's go," she nearly shrieked with excitement. We headed down the stairs, our shoes clicking in time with one another. Once in the kitchen, she grabbed her purse and dug for the keys. "A purse. I need to remember to get you a purse," she murmured to herself, mentally checking items off her list. She opened the door, and I hesitated before following her outside. The backyard was quiet, with nothing but birds fluttering in the tree-shaded space. The sound of our shoes against the concrete was loud in the otherwise peaceful yard. Once she locked the door behind her, she hurried toward the van. I followed, my footsteps slowing as I neared the edge of the house. I checked the street, seeing a bike roll by and scanning for any onlookers. When I was sure no one was in sight, I made my way around the vehicle to the passenger side and reached for the door handle. It was locked. I knocked on the window, trying not to panic, and waited. Just as I was about to dart back into the house, I heard the click of the locks, and the door opened. I climbed in quickly, relief washing over me. "Nail polish. Don't let me forget to get you some," she said, as if noticing the state of my hands. I looked down at them. They were rough from all the summer activities, not exactly feminine. I wondered if my friends would still want to play ball with me or if I'd be relegated to the sidelines with the other girls. Jenny played with us, but she was more like one of the boys. As those thoughts raced through my mind, Mom started the engine, and we pulled away. The street was full of people, and I kept my gaze forward, not daring to look around. Mom waved and honked, but thankfully didn't slow down. We were on a mission, and soon we were heading out of town. I could finally breathe a little easier. How was I going to get through this? Apparently, I wasn't the only one asking that question. It'll get easier, Jamie. Trust me. Once you stop hiding and everyone meets you, you'll be just another young woman, and they'll forget all about it. Just act relaxed and don't look guilty. You look great, and no one will treat you badly. Mommy will protect you. She turned for a moment, winked, and we both giggled. She knew how to get me to laugh, and for the first time, it felt good to laugh at all of this. I turned to look out the window, and sure enough, the first sign for the mall came into view. Even before it appeared, excitement surged within me. This was the biggest moment of my life so far, and I felt like I was about to step in front of a class to make a presentation. Funny how fear could feel so different depending on the situation. 5 miles to go. Are you ready for this? I am if you are, I replied, trying to sound confident. Mom took my trembling hand in hers, and we rode in silence as the mall's parking lot came into view. Looking at the sea of cars, doubt started creeping in. See? There's hardly anyone here today, Mom said. I looked at her, stunned. Sure, there weren't as many cars as there had been when we visited after last Thanksgiving, but to me, it still looked crowded. We drove down the first aisle, but with no spots near the entrance, Mom turned the corner and backed up the next row. Despite the bright sun, the entrance was partially hidden in shadows, and I could see several people lingering outside and a steady stream of others going in and out. A car pulled out, and Mom quickly maneuvered into the spot. Without hesitating, she grabbed the keys, tossed them into her purse, and got out of the car. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I knew that if I didn't move soon, I wouldn't be able to go through with it. She stood behind the car, waiting patiently for me to follow at my own pace. I hesitated for a moment before pulling the handle, hearing the door pop open. The sun blazed down, but the day was cool. Slowly, I lowered myself to the asphalt, feeling my feet take a solid grip on the ground. I locked the car and slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of the door closing almost felt like the point of no return. Mom had the keys, and running back into the house didn't seem like an option anymore. Just then, a car passed behind us. The driver didn't glance at us, and his wife, or whoever she was, looked over but didn't react. They parked a few spots down and headed toward the mall without a second glance. Mom was smiling at me, clearly noticing that they hadn't noticed anything unusual. I didn't spontaneously combust right there, and she seemed proud of how well I was handling it. You look great, Jamie. They didn't even notice. No one else will either. Just stay calm and act like everything is normal. We walked toward the entrance, Mom's hand holding mine. I didn't have a purse yet, something I was sure I'd get used to, and I was grateful for the comfort of her touch. You know, it's funny, she said, trying to keep the mood light. Secretly, I always hoped for a girl after having 3 boys. I chuckled at the thought. Maybe I did have a reason for wanting to dress this way after all. I could just picture myself on TV, declaring, Freud was right, moms are to blame for everything. What's so funny? She asked. Nothing. I'll tell you later. She was happy to hear me laugh, especially given the circumstances. We reached the end of the aisle and noticed a bus had just pulled up. More people were milling around, but no one seemed to notice us. As cars rolled by without incident, we stepped onto the curb, and I saw our reflections in the tinted doors ahead. The sun was bright, casting our images clearly, and I paused for a moment. I'm all right. Just balked, I muttered, trying to hide my nerves. Mom released my hand, and I suddenly felt exposed. A man pushed through the door and held it open for us. I practically speed-walked through it, getting inside just ahead of her. As I stepped into the wide space between the sets of doors, Mom followed and opened the second door. Did you know that ladies can open their own doors once in a while? She teased, a grin spreading across her face. And they also say thank you when someone does it for them. I know, I just wasn't expecting it, I muttered. I figured as much, she said as we stepped into the store. The main aisle stretched out before us, and we were now in the women's clothing section. Mom had been here enough times to know exactly which entrance was best. Let's head into the dress department for a minute, she suggested, gesturing to our right. She must have noticed the look of terror on my face when I saw a group of girls and their mothers rounding the corner, heading toward us. Without needing to be told, I followed her into the racks, taking refuge in the clothing. I stayed there, hidden, for a few moments before turning and watching the group pass by. The girls were around my age, and as always, I envied the way they dressed, talked, and moved. It hit me in a wave, I could now do all the things they did. Looking down at my outfit, I realized it was a bit more formal than what they were wearing for a day at the mall, but one girl in particular caught my attention. While her friends wore tight t-shirts, jeans, and sneakers, she had on a simple yet beautiful sundress and low heels. It wasn't flashy, just pretty. Did you see her? I asked, sensing Mom had moved behind me. Very pretty. Did you like the outfit? Mom always knew exactly what I was thinking. Looks like we have a starting point, she said with a knowing smile. We left the dress department and moved across the aisle. It felt like I had abandoned any pretense of blending in as we made our way through the aisles, and my nerves flared up again. But the excitement I felt kept pushing those nerves aside. The rows of dresses, mostly fall styles for back to school, were everywhere. I wandered through them, running my fingers over the soft fabrics, velvet, cotton, silk. The idea that I could choose any of these, buy them, and wear them made me feel elated. We would take them to the counter, Mom would pay, and then they'd be mine to keep. The thought was intoxicating. Jamie, Mom called from a few racks over, I found something similar to what that young lady had on. It's on clearance, but let's focus on getting you some clothes for school and for fall first. We can come back for things like this in the spring. I picked up the soft fabric, feeling the iridescent green color between my fingers. The cut was different, and though it had caught my eye, it wasn't as captivating in my hands as it had been when I saw it on her. I nodded and returned it to the rack. Mom moved further down the aisle, and I didn't notice the young lady who had been shopping with her mother until she looked up and caught sight of me. She did a double take, and I froze, unsure of what to do. It must have seemed odd to her, and she greeted me with a simple, "Hi." "Hi," I replied, meekly, before turning quickly on my heel and following Mom. "See? You didn't combust," she teased. I chuckled nervously at the thought, imagining myself bursting into flames. I had survived my first encounter, but I still felt the tension building in me. We spent about 20 more minutes looking through the racks, selecting a few outfits. I was so excited to be getting them that I eagerly followed Mom toward the register. "Here you go," she said, handing me the clothes. "Thanks," I replied, balancing them on one arm while standing by her side. "Well, there's the dressing room. Go try them on." "What? You want me to go into the girls' dressing room?" I asked, surprised, glancing at the doorway where girls were coming and going. Even from here, I could see the half doors on each stall. "You're a girl now, Jamie," Mom said gently. "Just go in, pretend like this is all boring to you, and don't dawdle. Try them on, check yourself in the mirror, and if you like one, come back out here and let me see." I hesitated, then slowly made my way toward the dressing room. Trying to act like I belonged, I picked a stall and walked straight to it, determined not to hesitate if I bumped into someone. I made it to the stall without any issues, but when I closed the door, I realized there was no mirror inside. It had been at the end of the dressing room hallway. I would have to step out and check each outfit in the mirror. I could do this. I just had to keep moving forward. Not sure what to do, I quickly undressed, anxious about being caught. I slipped into the first dress and struggled to get the buttons fastened up the front. It felt strange since the buttons were stitched on the opposite side from my usual clothes, which I found a little odd. The dress was a size or two too big, and without any ties at the back, it didn't fit well. I didn't need a mirror to tell me it wasn't right. Despite Mom's usually great taste, 2 of the 5 dresses weren't flattering at all. I didn't waste any time trying them on, even though I was safe in the dressing room. The last 2 dresses, however, were more promising. Both were made of cotton and blue in color. One was light blue with delicate white flowers scattered across it. Sleeveless, it fit perfectly, and the zipper at the back cinched it around my frame nicely. I reluctantly undressed again and reached for the final dress. It had short sleeves and was solid blue, no pattern. It buttoned up the front and tied just above my rear. It fit well around the waist, but it was tight around the shoulders and chest. The thought of my bust pressing against the fabric felt strangely erotic. Ultimately, the choice became clear. I slipped out of the last dress and stared at my reflection. It was a satisfying thought, knowing how I looked, but then the stories about dressing room cameras rushed into my mind, pushing me to quickly dress and leave in a panic. Despite the increasing number of people passing by, I exited the dressing room and made my way back to the dress section. Thankfully, Mom was near the first rack and spotted me approaching. "No luck?" she asked, noticing my arms full of dresses. "This one," I said, showing her the dress I'd picked. "I know you didn't see it, but can I show it to you at home?" "I don't see why not," she replied, studying each one as I passed them back to her. She examined the tags and mentally noted everything for later. After placing the last one back on the rack, she took the dress I had chosen and started moving toward another section of the store. We repeated the process several more times, picking out a few pairs of slacks, tops, and sweaters. It wasn't surprising that our tastes were similar, nothing too flashy, but still far from what I had at home. The clothes were different enough that I wouldn't blend in with the crowd, but they weren't overly feminine either. With the dress and several bags in tow, we reached the shoe department. I had always been drawn to shoes during past trips to the mall, but today it felt different. Mom took a few of the bags from me, and I started looking at the shoes on display. I was so absorbed in the variety that I didn't even notice a saleswoman approaching. "Can I help you?" she asked. I looked up to meet her gaze, my heart skipping a beat. I tried to appear calm, but I could tell my eyes betrayed my nervousness. "See anything you like, dear?" the saleswoman asked, looking at me with a kind expression. I struggled to speak at first, but finally said, "Could I see these 4, please?" I pointed at the shoes on the table, still trying to keep my gaze on the floor. "What size are you?" she asked. 8, Mom and I answered together. We exchanged a knowing glance as the saleswoman turned to get the shoes. "Size 8, huh? Guess that means I might be close to fitting them too," she said with a grin, trying to lighten the mood. I felt a pang of guilt but managed a small smile. I set the bags down as directed and took a seat while we waited. When the saleswoman returned with the shoes, she knelt down in front of me. I couldn't help but laugh when she commented, "Seems you've got a shoe fetish, just like your mom." We both giggled as she helped me slip into the first pair, a low-heeled black pump. The 3-inch heel tapered to a sharp point. They were elegant, but they slipped a little since they didn't have a strap to hold them in place. I tried on a few other pairs, each one a perfect fit. Though they weren't my favorite tennis shoes at home, I felt a thrill as I tried them on. I picked out a simple white canvas pair with a slight platform, feeling satisfied with my choices. The saleswoman, eager to make a sale, quickly gathered the boxes. "Anything else?" she asked. I gave Mom my best pleading look, and she caved, agreeing to buy them all. We headed to the register, and for the first time, I found the courage to look up at the woman who helped us. The credit card machine hummed while we stood, waiting for the transaction to complete. "Getting a head start on school shopping?" the cashier asked, noticing how much time the sale was taking. I looked up, meeting her eyes, and nodded softly, replying with a quiet, "Yes." "These won't be on sale next week, but we'll have plenty of other options." Feeling more confident, I assured her, "We'll definitely be back." Mom signed the receipt and glanced over at me as we gathered all our bags. "You're adapting really well, Jamie. I'm very proud of you." "Thanks. It's getting easier." We approached the edge of the main aisle and stepped onto the tile floor. The sound of our heels clicked with each step, and while it would probably get old, at that moment, it was music to my ears. I turned with newfound confidence, but Mom wasn't by my side. I looked back and saw she had turned in the opposite direction, framed by the opening to the mall. She gestured with her head. "Let's grab an early dinner. I'll call Dad before we leave to make sure he and Noah aren't home when we get there. You'll need to find a place for all this stuff." She held up several bags, "and I'll come up with a speech to prepare your dad before you come down." As we moved forward, several other shoppers passed by, one young man glancing over at me as he walked. Our eyes met for a second, and he smiled before continuing on. I turned back to Mom, relieved that no one seemed to notice. We stepped through the entrance and into the mall, a mother and daughter on a mission. Most of the quick eateries were centered around the food court, but Mom guided me toward the fern bar near the store. It had the familiar decor of stained glass, dark booths, and copper railings. As we approached, a young woman appeared at the hostess stand. I recognized her from the area, though she was a few years older than me, and instinctively positioned Mom between us as we walked up. "2, non-smoking please." We followed the hostess to the back, where we took a booth in the corner. Not wanting to overwhelm me, Mom took the seat facing the restaurant while I nervously sat in the other. I opened the menu, pretending to read while the hostess rattled off the specials. After thanking her, Mom looked over her own menu, and we placed an order for diet drinks. When the waitress returned, we also ordered salads and a cheese stick appetizer. I was starting to pay more attention to my figure now, after all. I glanced around the restaurant from the relative safety of my seat, observing the few couples nearby. Looking down, I realized I was still wearing the same dress I had started out in, and after nearly 3 hours, I was starting to feel comfortable. Even this first trip to the mall had become manageable. I had often dreamed of dressing up and doing something like this, but the idea of eating in a restaurant was beyond what I had imagined. In a store, I could always escape if things felt wrong. Walking through the mall, there were always exits, but here, in a restaurant where we had ordered food, I knew I couldn't just bolt. It was exciting and surreal. Not only had I blended in, but I had the chance to do it with my mom. Meeting friends and classmates would be hard, but I wouldn't be the only one in this situation. Family might be a challenge, but we didn't see many extended relatives. I couldn't wait for this year's Christmas card photo. I caught my reflection in the glass above Mom's head as I savored the cheese sticks with ranch dressing. Just then, a woman approached the table. It wasn't our waitress, but Mom greeted her warmly and exchanged a few words about the family. She knew her, but not very well. I thought I might be invisible when Mom waved her hand towards me in the booth. "Jassy, this is my daughter, Jamie." "Hello, Jamie. Nice to meet you." "Thank you," I replied, extending my hand. She shook it, and I felt a little more confident. When the waitress returned with our lunch, Jassy bid us goodbye, and we dug into our salads. Between bites, we chatted. Mom continued to marvel at how she had chosen a name for me that worked just as well for a boy or a girl, unlike my brothers. Then she told me how much she had wanted a girl after 3 boys. I joked that I should blame her for my predicament, and we both laughed heartily. I asked her about the handshake with Jassy. Should I have just nodded and said hello? Do women even shake hands? She explained that it was perfectly fine, and in business, it was expected. However, I'd need to do it in a more feminine manner. We practiced a few times at the table until I felt confident I had it down. The waitress returned 10 minutes later as we finished up our salads. We declined dessert, and Mom took care of the bill. We stood up, gathered our packages, and headed for the exit. The restaurant had filled up with an early dinner crowd during our meal, and I got a lot of practice trying to blend in as we made our way out. We passed by the line waiting to be seated and wandered back into the anchor store where our day had begun. I spotted a counter to my left and we headed toward it. The display case was filled with stylish sunglasses, and I quickly found a pair I liked. To my surprise, they were the least expensive on display. I told the young lady at the counter that I'd wear them out, and she removed the tags, handed them to me, and processed my payment. With the sunglasses on, I could now observe the world through different lenses. It was a kind of shield for me, hiding behind the glasses, while I checked out the people around me. I glanced at my reflection in the mirrored column near the exit of the mall, still amazed by the image staring back at me. It almost felt like a dream. After enjoying the moment, Mom motioned me over to a table where we picked up my final purchase of the day. I looked over the small selection of purses and chose a simple black leather one. The others seemed too big, like luggage. Mom knew exactly which one I'd pick. "You'll want something bigger than that," she said, "but this one's similar." I nodded, accepting her choice. It seemed like a bit much for now, but I was sure it would turn out to be a great decision later. Once Mom paid for it, the cashier bagged the purse, and we headed out of the store. As we stepped into the mall again, Mom unwrapped it, tapped the bags inside to give it shape, and handed it to me. I slipped my left arm through the straps and slung it over my shoulder. "It'll get a lot heavier," she said with a wink as we made our way through the doors. With my new clothes, sunglasses, and a more confident attitude, we passed people coming in without a second thought. I felt like a new woman, probably thanks to the sunglasses, when we were nearly at the car and heard a voice call out. Even without looking, we both recognized it as our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. Mom popped the latch on the back of the car, and we started loading our bags as she approached. "Hello, Kim," Mom said cheerfully. "Hello, how are you, Jessie?" "I'm doing well. How's the family?" Mom asked, and they chatted about what was going on in their families. We lived on the same street, and I was friends with two of her children. After finishing the conversation, Mrs. Johnson turned to me. "Out school shopping?" she asked, apparently none the wiser about my new look. "I'm a neighbor of Jassie's, Kim Johnson." I extended my hand, and she shook it firmly. "I've met you a few times, Mrs. Johnson." "It's me, Jamie." She blinked, confused for a moment, and then looked from me to Mom. "I've changed quite a bit since you last saw me," I said, watching her reaction. It was the first time today that someone else seemed unsure of the situation more than I was, and I felt a bit bolder, probably thanks to the sunglasses. "Like the others?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," I replied. "Well, you caught me off guard, but I have to say you look great." "I would have thought you were a niece or cousin," she said, nodding in approval. After a few more words, she quickly left, and we both knew word would spread fast at this point. It would be easier if people were prepared when they saw me. "Ready?" Mom asked. I nodded, and we got in the car. Mom juggled her phone while she drove down the narrow aisle and dialed our home number. After a few rings, someone picked up. "Hi, you're home already?" she said, listening for a moment. "Is Noah there?" "Okay, here's the plan. Jamie and I have a surprise for you, but it's going to take a little prep work. When we pull into the driveway, I'll honk the horn. If Noah's there, can you grab him and get him to slip downstairs for a minute?" She paused for a moment, listening. "No clues, no hints. Just tell him that." After a few more words, she hung up, and we continued our drive home. As we turned onto our street and into the driveway, she honked a few times, and since no one else was around, we didn't draw any attention. She parked the car and shut off the engine. "Stay here, and I'll wave if the coast is clear. Grab the rest of the bags on your way in and head upstairs. I'll call you when I've laid everything out for him, okay?" The calm I had managed to hold on to during our trip quickly evaporated as I began to worry about Dad's reaction. Without saying anything to me, Mom got out of the car, grabbed several packages, and headed inside. Moments later, she came back out and waved for me to join her. I grabbed the remaining bags and hurried down the walkway and into the kitchen. I reached my room in seconds, adding my purchases to the pile Mom had already placed in the corner. I closed the door but left it slightly ajar so I could hear the shouts I was sure would come from downstairs. Mom must have retrieved Dad from the basement because I could now hear her voice rising, her words reaching my room. A minute passed, then two. All I could hear was Mom's voice, which was unsettling. Dad was either taking it well or bottling up a storm. I'd never seen him lose his temper, so I hoped for the best. Eventually, I heard Dad's voice join the conversation, probably asking questions about the details of the story Mom was sharing. Almost 20 minutes had passed before Mom called up the stairs. "Jamie, will you please come down now?" It wasn't really a question I could refuse. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself, opened the door a little wider, and began my slow descent down the stairs. My heels muffled against the carpet as I carefully made my way down, pausing at the bottom before rounding the corner into the kitchen, where Mom and Dad were sitting. I hesitated for a brief moment before I walked in, not able to keep my chin up until I sat in the chair along the adjacent wall. When I looked up, I saw Mom's proud smile across the room. "You look nice, Jamie," Dad said. His words surprised me, and I turned toward him. It was more accepting than I dared hope while I waited upstairs. "Thank you," was all I could manage. I sat still, my feet crossed at the ankles and my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Mom relayed how this had started nearly 2 weeks ago, and Dad gently reminded me that I could have come to them sooner. It was a tone similar to the one he used when we had our talk about illegal medication last year. I felt a slight twinge of guilt, but this situation was far different from hiding something like smoking a joint. "I know," I replied, and for the next hour, I recounted the events of the past 2 weeks, continuing with the story of today's shopping trip. Dad listened intently, smiling and laughing along with us. We finished the conversation with Dad acknowledging that this would be tough for all of us at first, but that we would work through it together. Mom then shifted the topic to food since Dad hadn't eaten yet. She hadn't gone out for dinner as she originally planned because she was concerned that news of what was happening would reach Dad before we had a chance to explain everything in the privacy of our home. Thankfully, things had worked out. As we all rose from the couch, we moved toward the kitchen. At the bottom of the stairs, Dad put his arm around my shoulders and gave me a gentle squeeze. I wasn't sure how my brothers, particularly Noah, would react, but with both parents accepting me, I knew I had their support, and that was enough. "I'm going to go upstairs and unpack," I said, needing a few moments to myself. "Hope you're not tired of mac and cheese?" Mom called to Dad as I headed upstairs. "Because we really went through a lot today." I heard them laugh as they entered the kitchen, and I made my way to my room. As I unpacked my new things, I heard Noah arrive late. Mom explained the situation to him again, this time with Dad beside her. He made a lot of noise when he entered, but I soon drifted off to sleep, knowing a new life awaited me the next day. A doctor's appointment would be scheduled, followed by an interview with scientists. There would be no need to file papers to change my name, but my gender would need to be officially corrected. The next morning, I woke up early with the energy to get dressed, do what I could with my hair, and attempt to repeat the makeup process Mom had shown me. By the time I made it downstairs, Mom and Dad were already having breakfast, and as expected, Noah was still asleep. I almost finished my meal before we heard him stir upstairs. He didn't bother to shower, just threw on a t-shirt and shorts and made his way downstairs. His eyes were half closed, but once they opened, they immediately found me sitting at the table. "Morning," Noah mumbled as he gathered his cereal supplies and took his usual seat across from me at the table. He didn't skip a beat and got to work, just like any other day. Life seemed to carry on as normal, and I couldn't quite figure out how I felt. Was I relieved? Angry? I would need more time to sort through my emotions, especially with the full agenda that lay ahead. A day of doctor appointments, scientists, and even a trip to the local drugstore awaited me. At the doctor's office, everything seemed fine. He found no major issues aside from the unusual remnants of my manhood being reabsorbed into my body and declared me healthy. The scientists confirmed the same conclusion. However, before I could head to the drugstore, the CDC wanted to investigate where I had been stung. They weren't ready to conclude that the sting caused the transformation, but after hearing my detailed account and how I linked the two incidents, they made calls and managed to gather similar information from others once the right questions were asked. Dad had mowed the lawn 3 times since the incident, but on that particular day, fate was on our side. The creature that stung me had fallen into the flower bed instead of the lawn. It appeared to be a normal wasp to anyone who had viewed it, but tests would be conducted to determine its exact nature. Weeks later, the press revealed that it was an African variety that had been inadvertently released by a local breeder, along with its colony. Without any competition, the queen had gone about her routine of stinging male drones and converting them into breeding females to rapidly grow her population. There had only been one queen, and I had ended her. No more mysterious transformations were expected in our town. Once the case was closed, the scientists left, and the newspapers shifted their focus to the upcoming elections, as my story faded from the front pages. That marked the beginning of my new life, filled with doctor's appointments and new beginnings. Over the next week, neighbors stopped by to see what all the activity around our house was about. Most had already heard the full story from Mrs. Johnson, but now they wanted to meet me in person. Once the CDC declared the town safe, they began bringing their children over as well. It was clear they had discussed things beforehand to ensure the introductions went smoothly. Some of the encounters were easier than others. A few friends I thought I knew never really returned, while others seemed to visit more often. It was eye-opening, realizing how much people change when something significant happens in your life. When school started that fall, things went surprisingly well. I made new friends, including 2 others who had gone through the same transformation. We quickly grew close and started attending the same middle school, while one of the others went on to high school, and the last moved away with their family. Despite my initial doubts, the town embraced me and the others without much fuss. I was lucky to have my family's support throughout it all. My older brothers visited after the news spread across the country. Mom had prepared them ahead of time, and they were as supportive as I could have hoped. Dad still had his 3 boys, but our relationship was stronger than it had ever been. Mom had the daughter she'd always dreamed of, and I had the life I had always wished for. Life, it seemed, was going to be great.